Well, with me now, former FBI Special Agent Bobby Chacon, Democratic strategist Caroline Heldman, and Republican strategist Austin James. Welcome to you all. Good to have you with us. Bobby, let me start with you. We're now learning that the firing of James Comey comes a week after he went to the DOJ asking for more resources to expand this Russia probe. Do you buy the administration's explanation for how he came to be fired, especially in light of these new details?
Well, I'm not sure, and I know that there's some deniability on the part of the Justice Department about whether that request actually took place or not. There's no way around how bad this looks as far as timing, and compounded by the way it was actually handled and the way the termination actually took place. I mean, I think that there was a number of things that started to make Director Comey not the most effective leader over at the FBI, and so I think that at least among the rank and file, there was a split about whether, his days were numbered and whether it might be good to bring somebody new in. But the timing certainly doesn't look good.
Yeah. Caroline, to you, we're now hearing that the president had effectively been stewing on this situation with Comey for a while now, for a couple of days. And according to sources, he had become increasingly frustrated with Comey and had ultimately concluded that Comey was his own man and could not be trusted in a role so pivotal to the presidency. This coming to CNN via sources. What do you make of that?
Well, a couple of things. The first is there could be a concern that if he's his own man on Russia, that bodes poorly for the president's campaign, given the ongoing investigation. But it's really clear, right, that he's had issues with Comey for a while. Early on in the presidency, he made a comment, he blew Comey a kiss in January and said, you're more popular than I am, which critics at the time said, that's not a good place to be with Donald Trump. He likes the spotlight. And then a couple of months later, we have Comey coming out and saying that there is no justification or basis for the claim that Barack Obama wiretapped Trump Tower, and that was embarrassing. And then last week, we saw Comey embarrass the president again by essentially challenging the legitimacy of the outcome of his election by saying it made him mildly nauseous that he might have played a role. And of course, there's good evidence that he did. There was a 3 percentage point drop after his October 28th letter came out saying that they were reopening the investigation into Clinton. So there are lots of reasons to think that a thin-skinned president might react in a retaliatory fashion. The problem is the timing, though.
Yeah.
You can't fire someone who is investigating you like this and expect to get away unscathed.
Austin, the
Sure.
White House apparently is surprised by the backlash. That's what we were getting from our own Dana Bash. The White House was keen to stress that the president's decision to fire James Comey was predicated on this memo from the acting attorney general.
Sure.
Now we're hearing that the attorney general, according to the Washington Post, is none too happy with that narrative that is emerging and is threatening to resign. Does this put the White House in a tight spot?
Sure. Well, so let's backtrack a little bit. I think, and Bobby had some good points to make on this. I mean, Trump promised to remove bad actors from Washington, and Comey was a lightning rod for multiple reasons, dating back to October of last year, led by Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi. They were calling for his resignation. I mean, there were claims that he had broke the law. And so Trump is only following through with that. I mean, this is a leader.
What, 10 months later?
There's probably a debate. He had much more important things to do, I would argue, in his first 100 days. There's probably a debate of whether he should have, and maybe, if he was here, he could tell us, I wish I had done it previously. But I think she's absolutely right. I think this boils down to a decision that was always going to come to bear. I mean, this is the leader of the most important, most powerful law enforcement organization in the world, arguably, and he was corrupted, right?
Okay,
he was a bad actor.
By your own logic, he was the leader of the most important intelligence agency in the world. But by your analysis, why wait 10 months to remove him then?
Well, and so listen, I mean, the White House and Trump himself is saying, listen, this has been on my mind since day one, and I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to over-politicize bad optics. And it comes down to bad optics. I mean, we elected a businessman, and I know she would disagree, but we elected a businessman who doesn't understand optics. And I think that's probably a good thing if the media and Democrats, kind of got off their high horse a little bit and kind of looked at this objectively. there's nothing nefarious here. And so if nothing nefarious comes out...
We don't know that. We don't know if there's anything nefarious
So how can we
because
make
Donald
claims?
Trump has, but we don't know because Donald Trump has given us a false reason for doing this. According to the Rosenstein document, he did this because he's upset about Hillary Clinton and how she was treated back in July.
Listen,
and that's ridiculous.
No, that goes back
Nobody
to her question.
buys that.
Listen, that goes back to her question. I mean, you've got a businessman in the White House. You don't have a business in the White House. I mean,
You think he cares about Hillary Clinton? You think that is why he fired Comey?
The White House.
But he has to be honest with us for us to know, to have any faith in his decision that it didn't have to do with Russia.
He needs to stop being an authoritarian, successful CEO, and he needs to start being a president and a leader of a White House. Those are things he's going to learn on the job.
Let's bring Bobby in at this point. One of the concerns and the fallout of all of this is, where does it leave the investigation that the FBI had been leading into all things Russia? Where does it leave the issue of independence on the part of the FBI when it comes to that probe, bearing in mind the man or woman who will lead it next will have been picked by the president?
Well, you know, a lot of us hope that the person picked will come from either inside the FBI or was at one point an agent in the FBI. That's a huge hope for the Bureau. If that's the case, you have somebody that's familiar with how these investigations should go. They're not from the Justice Department. They're not a career Justice Department official. The hope, because they have a different mindset when they approach these things. And so, you know, as far as the investigation, personally, I've been in some of those rooms. I've been in on some of those investigations. Things don't change. The team, the investigative team, is still in place. Their supervisory structure is still in place, all the way up to the deputy FBI director. And so the one man at the top changed, and so the rest of that chain of command hasn't changed, and the team hasn't changed. They're going to go ahead with their work. They're the utmost integrity. They're professionals. They're experienced in this stuff. They're going to go ahead and do this investigation the way it should be done.
Let me follow up with the question that many have, which is, should Donald Trump put in a Trump loyalist to lead the FBI? Could that person quash the entire investigation?
Number one, I hope he doesn't put a loyalist in. You know, the FBI has always prided itself on the director being his own man, and unfortunately, that's one of the reasons that's being touted as you know, him getting rid of. Comey was not exactly, you know, in favor in the Obama White House after he made a speech on the Ferguson effect. He was called back to the White House, taken out back of the woodshed, and read the riot act by the Obama administration. We all remember how Louis Freeh's contentious relationship with his boss, Bill Clinton. So, you know, the FBI director has a history of being their own man, and I think it should be, that should remain, and that's a good, healthy relationship, and it needs to stay that way. And you know, we hope that it's a career FBI agent. There's plenty of them out there that are qualified. You got guys like Mike Rogers, who was an FBI agent, then he was on the Intelligence Committee in Congress. You have many others that were career FBI people that know the Bureau and know how it should be run. And we're all, you know, many of us are hoping that the pick is someone who can be their own man, but also know how the Bureau should conduct its affairs. That's not always the case with career Justice Department officials.
All right, Caroline, to you, the White House working overtime to get the timeline right and to get their point across as to why they came to this decision. But Senator Elizabeth Warren is not buying it. Take a listen to what she had to say.
Do you think this was a cover-up?
You know, I think that there's just no doubt, given the timing, that the reason that Comey was fired was because Donald Trump wants to cut off any investigation into any connections that he has with his campaign and connections to the Russians.
So, Caroline, what should the Democrats' next move be here?
Well, they've already come out and said we're going to stop business, and perhaps in both the House and the Senate.
Move?
Well, it's a partisan move. I don't know if it's a right move. I think that they need to exert whatever leverage they can in order to make sure that a person gets into the top position at the FBI who's not a loyalist, right? Someone who's actually going to be objective. There's been talk about putting Trey Gowdy in, that he's on the short list, as well as a number of other politicized people. So I think they need to absolutely put a stop to that. Elizabeth Warren is claiming to know that it had to do with Russia. I know that the optics are bad.
She's just one of many. So, I mean, you know, we have to call a spade here.
Until he comes out and really rebuts that, we don't have anything to go on, so we'll just assume that's the case.
And Austin, by that point, I understand what you're saying, that we only have the White House's word to go on this.
Sure. But don't we have a responsibility? Don't elected officials have a responsibility to make claims that they can back up. And I guess my broader point is that, you know, listen, there's no love lost between, you know, media channels. There's no love lost between the mainstream media. There's no love lost between Democratic politicians. To your point, though, to overly politicize this, I think, takes us in a completely wrong direction. And that could be a political battle that we have for the next 3 years. You know, and whose fault is that at the end of the day?
But let me push back and ask you to respond to the counter of that, which is the president chose to fire the man who's leading an investigation into him, that he made this a political
thing. You know,
right?
Caroline, you know, we were talking back in the green room, and we don't agree on a whole ton, but we do agree on this, that the man, you know, he probably has come from a very successful business career where I know a lot of CEOs in the private sector, and they make decisions that they think are best, and everyone is supposed to follow that. You know, he is now in a position where he needs to take collective knowledge and make group decisions, right? And even though if he's, you know, the ultimate, you know, kind of pulling the lever, you know, yeah. Listen, I don't know that there's any way to say this in a way other than to be blunt, which is he probably had an ego breakdown, right? He probably said, hey, listen, this is a man who I thought we had gotten over with. I had my doubts, okay? I thought that we had gotten over that. Now, during the hearing, he says, uh-oh, I'm going to wade back to the middle. I'm going to try to appease Democrats. He doesn't know what this guy's going to say next. You know, he's a compromised leader of the most important law enforcement agency.
And
he had to make a decision.
That includes being a wild card with Russia. That includes not knowing what he's going to say next and being his own man on the Russia investigation.
And this conversation could go on and on and on, and it will for days to come, for another 3 years. Caroline, Austin, Bobby, my thanks to all of you. Please come back. We'll keep it going.
Thank you.
Thank you.